Okay guys, welcome back to the channel. Right, Trap is being released this Friday. Yes, it's the new film from M.Night Shyamalan. So I thought, what not better time to do a ranking of some of his movies. He is a director that's had a lot of ups and downs. He's had a pretty prolific career. He was really hot at the start of his career, had a bit of a lull. Then he came back really strong with 2015's The Visit, which we'll get into. But up and down career, he was tipped as like the next Steven Spielberg right in the early days, which is, I think, a little bit over dramatic when it comes to a statement like that. Don't get me wrong, his first couple of films were really good, but Steven Spielberg, let's bring it back a little bit, folks. But anyway, I like M. Night. Every time he releases a film, it is a film that I go to watch, especially with my partner, because there's normally an area of discussion that you can have after his films. Quick disclaimer before we get into it. There's 3 films I have not seen of M. Night Shyamalan. First one is his debut film, Praying with Anger. Second one is The Last Airbender, which unfortunately I've got no interest in watching it, but I might get around to it one day. And the third film is Lady in the Water, which I haven't seen, starring Bryce Dallas Howard, Paul Giamatti. That is a film that I've heard a lot about, a lot of different takes. Some people like it, some people think it's underrated, and some people think it's horrific. Please let me know in the comments, is it worth watching or should I stay away from it? But anyway, with that guys, let's get into my ranking. Coming in at number 11 is After Earth from 2011. In the 2010s, there was like a lot of science fiction movies. And in my head, a lot of them just merge together. I think there was like a formula set, a standard set when it comes to visual effects and whatnot. And I think there was a lot of films that were just visual noise. This is sort of one of them. This is just like a total vanity project, and not from M. Night Shyamalan, from Will Smith. And it sort of just brings the whole thing down a little bit for me. It was a clear strategy to try and get his son in the sort of main stratosphere of the acting world. The thing is, it's not like terrible or horrific. Just for an M. Night Shyamalan film, who usually has his own voice when it comes to these films, whether you like them or not, he is trying to say something with his films. This was just so generic and boring. It very much seems like with this movie, M. Night Shyamalan just felt like a hired hand. Now, at this point, he'd had a string of duds, so it was sort of understandable that he didn't have a lot of control on this film. But to be fair, I don't think anyone was going to have any sort of primary control on this film other than Will Smith. To me, it doesn't even feel like an M. Night film, so this one definitely comes in last place for me. Number 10 is The Happening from 2008. This film is like weirdly had a resurgence, I feel like, in the sort of last 10 years. So with this being out since 2008, it's been out for quite a while now. I feel like the overall consensus when it comes to this film is that it wasn't very good at all. It was a bit of a joke. So to see these sort of established YouTubers that I do actually respect come out with these think pieces and video essays on The Happening does blow my mind a little bit. But for each to their own, maybe I'm missing something with The Happening. Maybe. With this being sort of horror slash thriller, it's a bit weird because the tones don't really align with each other. I think this movie is like unintentionally funny, especially when it comes to the likes of Marky Mark. Yeah, Mark Wahlberg's character in this. Some of the dialogue and line delivery is some of the worst and very best I've heard in my life.
Look, I don't know if you guys have heard about this article in the New York Times about honeybees vanishing.
What the hell was Mark Wahlberg thinking with some of these line deliveries? And the other thing as well, when you look back at this film and look at some of the behind the scenes footage, Mark Wahlberg was pretty much like, what the hell's going on, and questioning a lot of things to do with this film. I can't tell whether it's supposed to be self-aware. Is this film supposed to be satirical in any way, shape or form? Sort of some of the vibes I was getting, like the one sort of scene that knocks me off my chair and leaves me scratching my head is the hot dog scene.
We're packing hot dogs for the road. You know, hot dogs get a bad rap. They got a cool shape, they got protein. You like hot dogs, right?
What the hell is going on there? It's not the worst thing I've ever seen. There are some genuinely creepy elements to this film. A few shots, especially of people like actually committing suicide and whatnot in mass. Like, it's pretty unnerving stuff when you're watching it. Very eerie. Like, Zooey Deschanel doesn't really do enough to save this movie either. And I think casting someone like her doesn't really give me much hope because I much find her as sort of like a comedic, romantic type. In this film, she's put up against Mark Wahlberg, and with some of her line delivery as well, it just leaves you really wondering what is going on. I had no idea what was happening in this film. Number 9 is The Village. Right, The Village is a bit of a weird one for me because in one aspect, I think it's pretty good. But the other aspect is that when you actually know the twist, I don't think the film is terribly rewatchable. The biggest problem with this movie for me is, like a lot of M. Night films, they normally involve a twist. And there's a couple of movies on my ranking that are quite low because of this. Usually when that twist happens and I've sort of let it soak in, that film then becomes not that rewatchable for me, and it's very much the case with The Village. Most of the setup is really good. The sort of concept of this village just being in the middle of nowhere and being very detached. Bryce Dallas Howard is pretty good in this film. We've got Joaquin Phoenix, we've got William Hurt in this film. The cast is really good. Very intense throughout for some of it. Like, the creature designs in this film always used to freak me the hell out. One thing M. Night does really well is blur the line between like thriller and horror. And this film blurs that line really well. I find all them invasion moments when these creatures come onto sight pretty intense and pretty eerie. The costume design for the creatures, monsters in this film are done exceptionally well. There's a scene where one of our characters goes into a shed and sort of sees these creatures hung up. I'm trying not to spoil this film if you haven't seen it, because the thing is, especially with The Village, maybe it's not a good film to re-watch, but if you've never seen it before, I 100% guarantee this film. The reason why it's so low is because it's not one that I go back to often. The twist as well, once you sit down with it for a little while and you actually start evaluating what's just happened and what's being revealed, there's a lot of logic issues that come into the fold. And that is something, even I, where most of the time I let logic be left at the front door when I'm watching a movie, even hurt my head at the time. It broke my brain a little bit. And I think that's one of the main reasons why I haven't went back to watch it, to be honest. Number 8 is The Visit. Right, to me, this is M. Night Shyamalan's comeback story. Yes, so this one is quite an interesting one because M. Night actually got a loan out against his own house of 5 million. Yes, the budget of this film was 5 million, funded by M. Night Shyamalan. You've got to think, at this point in 2015, M. Night, you know, his saving graces when it comes to Hollywood was these bangers that he released early on in his career, but there was a string of duds. So 2015 comes along, M. Night is struggling to get a movie financed by any studio. So I think at the time he was like, right, I've got this idea, and the only way I'm going to be able to accomplish this idea is if I fund it myself. So this is M. Night. He's got like a couple of daughters and stuff like that, taking a loan out on his own home. That was a ballsy move, and no matter how much you dislike some of his films, you've got to commend that. Also, one of the benefits with this film is that it was way, way less reliant on visual effects. I think that was one headache that was a bonus to M. Night that he didn't have to deal with. Number 7, we have Old from 2021. So don't take this as a negative, but this film almost reminded me as like a Black Mirror episode. Yeah, it's not dealing with technology, but it sort of gave me the same sort of vibe. This would have benefited probably from just being like an hour-long TV show sort of vibe. Old is actually based on a graphic novel, which I had no idea about until doing some research for this ranking. When I saw this, I had a pretty good time with it. To me, this is like through and through an M. Night film. And what I mean by that, it's got all the tropes of an M. Night film. In Old, it deals with this concept of people aging rapidly on this beach. I won't spoil any more than that. We've got the likes of Alex Wolff and Thompson McKenzie, I think she's called. So these two, they've got to play like children living in adults' bodies, and I think they do a really amazing job. I will say though, there's like a certain little subplot area situation that happens in this film involving them, and it sort of left a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth at the time. On rewatch, I sort of get over it, but it is one of them things that you go, oh my God, one of these kids who ends up aging rapidly ends up getting pregnant. I'll just leave it at that. And when you know how old this person's supposed to be, that is what left a bad taste in my mouth. The effects, for the most part, are pretty good. Obviously, there's some prosthetics that have got to get used in this film for some of the adults, because when they age, obviously, they're going to have lots of wrinkles and stuff. Overall, the film's pretty enjoyable. I think it's one of the better M. Night Shyamalan films. I like watching a film where it raises a lot of questions. And me and my partner, when we were watching this, it was like a healthy discussion throughout the film and after the film. The twist, bit hit or miss for me. It's not the best twist I've ever seen M. Night done, but serviceable for this film. I really like Old. It's got a few problems, but at the end of the day, I do recommend it. Number 6, we've got Knock at the Cabin, that come out in 2023. Now, I thought this was quality. For a long time, it was quite high up in my top 10 list of last year. I really like home invasion movies, and this is very much a play on the home invasion movie. We follow a couple played by Jonathan Groff and Ben Aldrich, who have an adopted daughter, Wen, who is the sweetest little girl ever. In the opening scene of this movie, there's an awesome sequence just between her, Wen, and Dave Bautista. Yes, Dave Bautista in this film is absolutely phenomenal. I would dare say it's Dave Bautista's best ever performance he's given in a film. If you'd asked me 10 years ago, Ellis, who do you think is going to be the best wrestler turned actor? I would not have said Dave Bautista. I would have probably said The Rock. How them tides have changed. In the last 10 years, Dave Bautista has done some amazing stuff with his acting, and he's worked with some incredible directors, which tells you that not only these elite directors, but most of Hollywood have got their eyes on Dave Bautista because they know he's got the goods. And he's absolutely phenomenal in this film. It's like, it's a weird sort of blend of him being really sweet and being upfront and being absolutely terrifying at the same time. There's like a weird part of me that if there was ever going to be a home invasion in here, I'd sort of wish that it was Dave Bautista doing it, because he seems like a really nice guy. The other person who we see in this film that I hadn't seen for donkeys was Rupert Grint. Yes, Ron Weasley himself. Now, he sort of just went off grid a little bit after Harry Potter. I think I saw one film with him, something about pants. It was quite refreshing to see him in this role and playing a pretty unhinged psychopath in this film. That guy's dead behind the eyes, and in this film, he was bringing some intensity to it. I would love to see Rupert Grint do a few more films, and especially in this sort of vein. There's only really one scene in this film that sort of does my nut in every time I watch it. And I've watched this a couple of times since last year as well, which must tell you something about the film. I don't like the segment of like switching the TV on and you see the giant wave. That whole sequence didn't look great. Now, you can sort of get away with it because it's been shown on a TV, so the effects don't have to look great. That sort of took me out of the film a little bit, but that is just a very, very brief nitpick with this movie. Now, it is based off a book, and from what I've heard, the book has a different ending, if not a better ending. Reading up afterwards and knowing what the sort of twist in the book is would have been much better and would have suited M. Night much better. Ultimately, the route he chose to take didn't kill the film for me at all, because I didn't know the ending of the book when I was watching the film, so that didn't ruin it for me at all. This is just a really solid thriller with an apocalyptic tinge to it, with a bit of a religious tinge to it. Like, I was really feeling it, I was really digging it, and for an early film at the start of the year, it absolutely blew me away. So, not one that I'll probably revisit that often now because I've seen it a couple of times, but I really do recommend Knock at the Cabin, if not for anything, just to watch Dave Bautista's best role of his career. Number 5, we have Glass. So, after I first watched this film, I didn't really enjoy it. Is that because the film's not very good, or is that because of my own expectation? So when this film started dropping trailers and whatnot, my hype levels were skyrocketed. And so they should have been, because this was a sequel to Unbreakable and Split, 2 films that I really, really enjoy and that we'll get to. But yeah, so when I first walked out the cinema, I was like, I don't know if I really enjoyed that much. And it takes a few bold swings. as M. Night normally does. We've got the cast of David Dunn, Bruce Willis, we've got Mr. Glass himself, Samuel L. Jackson, and we've got James McAvoy all returning for this third installment. I would say my main grievance with this film after seeing it is that we spent 80% of it in a mental asylum. Now, that's cool. I actually think in hindsight and on today's rewatch, I enjoy that aspect more. But at the time, I thought this absolutely blows. This is not what I sort of had in my head for the end of this trilogy. One thing M. Night does in this film is sets you up for this big climactic finish. Throughout the film, we've sort of been told about this giant tower, and we think the big showdown between the Beast and David Dunn is going to take place at this tower, and it doesn't. And after watching the film, that was a little bit of a letdown for me as well. But I actually think the thing that we do get at the end of the movie, the big showdown between James McAvoy and David Dunn, Bruce Willis's character, is pretty great. That one shot of James McAvoy as the Beast running across the courtyard will live in my brain rent-free, because that is sort of the Beast incarnated. This is like his powers really coming to fruition here. The guy is absolutely shredded, jacked to the max in this scene, and I don't know whether that's supposed to like tell you that this guy is literally transforming into something, but I really love that end sequence now. Didn't love it when it came out the cinema though. With the mental asylum being such a prominent thing in this film, it unfortunately slows the pace of the film down dramatically. And I just think for the third film in a trilogy that is now nearing 20 years old, 25 years old, they could have come up with something a little bit more spicy, a little bit better for the third film. Just the asylum visually always sticks in my brain, like the big pink asylum. Like I would say each one of his Unbreakable trilogy films have got this sort of like color scheme, color theme going on with it. The first one being blue, the middle one being like white, gray, and this third one being lots of pinks, greens, yellow. Like on the exterior, it looks like a very comic booky film, but when you actually get into the nitty gritty of it, it's not. We're looking at a sort of character study here on these three main players. I think Glass gets shat on a bit too much. I don't think it's a bad film by any means. I just think the problem with it is maybe all of our expectations when it comes to this film were just sky high. In fairness, M. Night, you did that yourself because you released two bangers in this trilogy, and the third one just ends up being a tiny little bit of a dud. But it's pretty high on my ranking, so I must enjoy it. I do recommend Glass. Number 4, we have got The Sixth Sense. Like, this is one of the best thriller / horrors ever. Now, does that mean it's a highly rewatchable film? No, it's not. And I imagine a lot of people would have thought that I would have had The Sixth Sense higher on this list. But I don't, because I can't lie, people. It's not one of them movies that I go back to very often. But I do remember when I first saw this movie, and I remember watching it a couple of times as a kid, and it did really freak me the fuck out. There's a few scenes in this film with our two leads that still haunt me to this day. Bruce Willis is phenomenal in this film. I think once you know the twist and you realise what the hell's going on, this film does bring you back for another rewatch. Maybe one more rewatch to think if you can pick up anything with Bruce Willis's character, because one, he's amazing in this film. And two, when you know the deal with his character, it's really mind-blowing stuff, and you reevaluate Bruce Willis's performance in the entire thing. This film literally put M. Night Shyamalan on the map. I think this absolutely blew people away on release. This film came out in 1999, so I'm not very coherent with its cinema release, but I do remember when this hit VHS, it was just like people needed to see this film, and it was a massive talking point for a lot of people. I think this is the film that famously put M. Night into that Steven Spielberg stratosphere, something that I don't think is good for any up-and-coming director to have that level of hype surround them, because surely it can only go downhill. But The Sixth Sense is a quality film. I highly recommend it. Toni Collette's in it. She puts in a really good performance. Like I said, there's some very, very eerie, creepy sequences in this film, especially when it involves one sequence involving a bed. Holy shit, get me the hell out of here. The other thing about The Sixth Sense as well, we can't deny that this has got one of the best twists, not even in M. Night's career, but just movies in general. I can imagine when people were in the cinema watching this, it was like Jaws on the floor, oh my god. One of M. Night's best, not my favourite, but definitely in that top shelf tier. Number 3, we have got 2016's Split. Yes, with James McAvoy, this is, whoa. This is probably one of my most rewatched M. Night films. I think it's absolutely brilliant. James McAvoy puts in a career best performance here. Maybe it's not career best, but definitely one of them. I would say not only is one of the best performances in any M. Night movie, but for the 2010s, this was pretty spectacular. I don't know if anybody's watching this that went to go and see Split in the cinema. Now, in 2016, I was I'd like to think, keyed in with movie news, movie gossip, what's coming out, what's not coming out, who's doing that, who's doing this. And there was no sniff that this may be a sequel to Unbreakable. There just wasn't. I had not heard any sort of rumours about it whatsoever. Luckily, I'd went to see this film on opening weekend, so I hadn't checked out any of the reviews or anything like that. I just sort of went into this with just seeing the trailer, and my god, me and my partner, she didn't know what the hell was up with me at the end of the film. As soon as that Unbreakable music starts playing in Split, I instantly grabbed her hand and I was like, oh my god. And when we actually see the reveal of David Dunn, take my money. Where's that sequel at, baby? Not only is it phenomenal for hiding the fact that it was a sequel to Unbreakable, the performances are absolutely epic. Not only James McAvoy, but Anya Taylor-Joy is phenomenal in this film as well. There's a lot going on with Anya Taylor-Joy's character behind the eyes, maybe some things that have happened, past trauma and whatnot, because that is sort of a plot to the film, that this James McAvoy is playing the Beast, who may or may not be like some sort of freak of nature, like as in sort of he's evolved as a human being. Some very freaky stuff, and the way he picks his prey and his targets, James McAvoy's character, is very unnerving. Split is just an absolutely fantastic film. I think in 2016, people weren't expecting to see a film this good from him, and also to give you that left hook where you just did not see it coming whatsoever, especially that ending. One of the best cinema moments I've ever had. Number 2, we've got from 2002, Signs. Now, guys, simply put, I think this may be my favourite alien invasion film of all time. Maybe it's Independence Day, but Signs would come straight after it. This thing genuinely creeped me out, even to this day. But as a kid, I had a bit of a fear of aliens and whatnot. The Fourth Kind, if you've ever seen that film, that's my worst nightmare. Back in the day, I thought this was a really amazing science fiction alien invasion movie. The only thing with this film is that it did get parodied quite a lot in Scary Movie. And for a long, long time, I didn't watch this film an awful lot because the first thing I thought of when it comes to Signs was, oh yeah, Scary Movie. Rewatching it today, I still think it's awesome. It still holds up really spectacular well. You know, that scene in the basement with the hand, yeah, that scene will still get me today. And we can't talk about Signs and not talk about that one scene. Yes, the birthday party, the famous birthday party, scared folks rotten. I watch that scene now. Doesn't hold its same scare factor that much today just because the CGI is a little bit dated. Back in 2002 sort of era, that CGI didn't really bother me. I didn't really notice it at the time. It was just really like a horrible, horrific scene. I've said it before on this video, but one thing he does do well is blend horror thriller. And not only horror thriller here, he's already putting some science fiction in here as well. All the crop signs and whatnot just build and add to this tension. Like at the start of the film, they think it's a bunch of kids playing and whatnot, and we know it's not. Builds and heights the tension up all the way through. We've got Joaquin Phoenix in here as well, like a younger Joaquin Phoenix. Really good, really solid performance here. Quite funny in times. I think intentionally funny though. There's got to be some sort of levity here and there because the themes of this film are pretty intense. Take Mel Gibson's character. I know it's easy to shit on Mel Gibson because of some of the stupid things he said in the past, but in this particular movie, with what his character's got to deal with in the present and the past, I think he does exceptionally well here. The actual designs of the aliens are my favourite sort of designs. The classic design, but they've put some little touches on it here and there. The fact that they're now sort of like chameleons and can camouflage themselves, even more scarier. A number of scenes in the crops on the farm and stuff like that, where you'll just see a hand, a leg, whatnot. Very, very eerie stuff. One thing M. Night loves to do is put himself in films. Now, this is no different. M. Night's got a little role in this film. The gantry scene with the fingers, you know which scene I mean, that was really intense when I was little and still sort of holds up today as well, I'd say. I think James Newton Howard's score to Signs is so, so good. The opening with the credits and whatnot, I love a good opening credits scene. We don't really get opening credits anymore, but this opening credits with the score over it, loved it. Guys, if you haven't seen Signs for whatever reason, please, I can't highly recommend this film enough. There is that sort of classic M. Night twist. We don't get the end of the film and it turns out the aliens are humans. It's not that sort of thing. There's maybe just a twist to deal with how we can beat these aliens, but I'll just leave it there. My number one pick for M. Night Shyamalan, say it with me, people, Unbreakable. I think this film has aged like the finest of wines. Why do you say? Not necessarily because the filmmaking's aged like a fine wine or anything like that. It does look of its time. It's not that though. It's the fact that we're so inundated with superhero films of today that this is so refreshing to go and watch again. Most of this movie, you're not realizing what you're watching. I certainly didn't when I was younger. It's like when I've got older, rewatching this film, which I do quite a lot, this film just stands massively out from all of M. Night's films. I think it's emotional where it needs to be. We're dealing with a certain situation when it comes to David Dunn and realizing who he is. I'd very much recommend watching this film. The basic premise is that Bruce Willis doesn't realize that he's a bloody superhero. I would say the first 10 minutes of this film, if it doesn't have you hooked, something's wrong, man, because when he's sat in the hospital and he's getting checked out and they've just told him about the accident that just happened and that he was the only survivor, that is a bit of a mind-bending situation. Samuel L. Jackson in this film is like supposed to be this villain and he has all the trademarks, all the gimmicks. I think this is such a clever movie, especially for the time when it came out, because we're not at a time period where we have 3-4 superhero films a year. So the fact that M. Night's come up with something this original and refreshing, I've got to absolutely commend him for it, because this film's spectacular, guys. If you have not seen Unbreakable, I highly recommend it. This is M. Night's only 5-star film for me. Yes, I do think that highly of it. Spencer Treat Clark, who plays Bruce Willis's son in the movie, there's a particular scene involving a kitchen with a gun, spectacular and very emotional. And there's another scene involving some weights. It's just his son watching Bruce Willis lift these weights and they keep adding more weights on. And they wonder, how are you able to lift all these weights? And the sort of surprise, shock on his face. Love all that stuff. The third act of this film is absolutely breathtaking in my opinion. And not only that, it's accompanied by an amazing, amazing score by James Newton Howard. That whole train sequence where he's in the train station and he's sort of gaining his powers, realizing that he's got them, scanning the areas for like bad people. That whole sequence, I love it. I can just picture it now on the music in my head. Unbreakable, without a doubt, is M. Night's best movie. For me, might be different for you. But anyway, guys, what do you think of M. Night Shyamalan? Do I need to watch Lady in the Water? Do I need to watch his other films that I haven't seen? What are your top 5 M. Night Shyamalan films? Comment below, let me know. And until next time, folks, I'll catch you later.